We're going to be covering Hurricane Ivan, I imagine, tomorrow night as well when it really hits. But right now, sitting in for Aaron Brown to cover us Newsnight and to take us for a 2-hour special edition is my buddy Miles O'Brien, safely in the confines of the studios. Not out there in the hunt, Miles. No, just comfortable. Go ahead.
Been there, done that. Happy New Year to you. Not a happy New Year along the shores of the Gulf of Mexico. Good evening from Atlanta, where we are watching yet another big storm as it marches on shore, leaving who knows what in its wake. For more than a month, we have seen the storms come and go, the death, destruction, and misery left behind. There is no natural disaster that comes with more advance notice. Forecasters watch waves become depressions, tropical storms, and then ultimately hurricanes, and their names become familiar. Charley, Francis, now Ivan. There was a time when the storms had no names and no advance billing. Of course, 104 years ago this week, a hurricane roared into Galveston, Texas. 10,000 at least died, the worst disaster in U.S. history. Tonight we all have fair notice, and that means lives will be saved. But despite all our technology to watch and model and predict these storms, we are powerless to do little more than hunker down and hope for the best. No hunkering down allowed. If you are in the rain-soaked whip tonight, however, first to Anderson Cooper in Mobile, Alabama. A headline, please, Anderson.
Miles, the winds have whipped up considerably here over the last half hour or so, in excess probably of 60 miles an hour. Can't get an accurate reading at this point. The residents here have hunkered down as well for what they anticipate is going to be a very long night indeed, Miles.
Anderson Cooper, not far from Mobile. Gary Tuckman is riding out the storm in Gulf Shores, Alabama. We'll get to Gary in just a few moments. And 60 miles to the west of Mobile, still very much in harm's way, Biloxi, Mississippi. That's where Susan Candiotti is. A headline from you, Susan.
Hello, Miles. Yes, here we are just starting to feel tropical storm force winds as people here prepare for what Ivan has to deliver, and flooding is one thing for sure. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Susan. 90 miles farther to the west, they're breathing a little easier in the Big Easy tonight, where we find John Zarella. A headline from you, John.
Miles, in the Big Easy tonight, people are breathing a little bit easier with residents evacuated and tourists in their hotels. The streets here are virtually deserted.
And that's a headline for sure. John Zarella in New Orleans. And someone who is never all wet when it comes to hurricanes, watching it from her perch in CNN's Weather Center, Orlin Sidney. Orlin, a headline from you.
I guess you missed me in Francis because I was wet then for sure. This storm, however, is being covered by Rob Marciano on the ground, and he's going to feel some 135-mile-an-hour winds before the night is out. Miles?
Orlin Sidney, more from you in a moment. We begin on the ground at the place with the bullseye on it tonight. Ivan the Ferocious bearing down on the city of Mobile, and not since Category 3 Frederick roared ashore 25 years ago have folks along Mobile Bay faced a more dangerous storm. Ivan is a Category 4 hurricane, and as it closes in, there are big worries about sustained winds of 135 miles an hour, towering waves in excess of 50 feet high, and a storm surge that could send Mobile Bay 16 feet over the seawalls. CNN's Anderson Cooper is there in the thick of it. Anderson.
Miles, yes, we are in Mobile, and it is that storm surge that so many people here are really concerned about. Some have said it could be as high as 20 feet. Max Mayfield, last of the National Hurricane Center, said to anticipate 10 to 15 feet of water flooding the downtown area here in Mobile, Alabama, and that will cause a lot of problems indeed. As you know, there have already been 2 deaths in Panama City Beach, Florida, not too far from here. The hope here, though, is that people have been prepared. They have evacuated, or tonight they are hunkered down because this storm is coming, and it is coming on fast.
As night fell, anxieties were quick to rise. The winds and waves kicked up, pounding beaches with heavy surf and rain, and carrying something new in the air: uncertainty and fear.
This is a very powerful, very dangerous, and unfortunately will probably be a very deadly storm.
The force of Hurricane Ivan's outer bands are battering hundreds of miles of coastline in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and the Florida Panhandle. Nearly 2 million coastal residents in 4 states have already fled to higher ground or are under evacuation orders.
Move north, get out of harm's way, and we'll rebuild that area as soon as we can.
With Ivan's course aiming at Alabama's Mobile Bay, the mayor of New Orleans is warning residents against complacency.
We are still implementing our disaster plans, getting prepared, and trying to evacuate as many people as possible out of the city.
New Orleans has imposed a citywide curfew until the danger passes. Louisiana residents with special medical needs are weathering the storm at the Superdome, while others have filled up some 33 shelters across the state. Emergency officials are warning everyone, don't take chances.
People, this is no storm to fool around and think you can ride out. People need to evacuate. They need to go to the nearest shelter.
I'm trying to get everybody to pack up and get in your car and spend the night in your car if you have to. There's no excuse to endanger your family by staying here.
Ivan is expected to cause significant damage no matter where it strikes. Monster waves are tugging at coastal homes on the Panhandle. Florida officials, still reeling from the destruction of Hurricanes Charlie and Francis, are bracing for the worst.
We can replant the trees and we can rebuild the homes, but we can't replace the people. So that's what today's message is all about, safety.
And the worst, of course, is still yet to come. But as I said, Miles, minute after minute, these winds are picking up. This rain is getting bad. We're already starting to see flooding in some areas. But, I mean, we are getting very significant gusts here. Even during that piece, it's very almost difficult to stand at times. You really have to push yourself into the wind. And I'm parallel to the wind. If I turned perpendicular at this point, I am not sure I could actually even stand up. It is getting very nasty out here very fast, Miles.
All right, Anderson, I hope you can hear me all right. Right now, are those winds, they're clearly in the hurricane realm right now, right?
Yeah, we have a wind meter, but frankly, it's not really working very well in these winds. A little ironic there. Rob Marciano, CNN meteorologist, said he thought these winds were in excess of 60 miles per hour sustained. At this point, though, we don't have an official count. We're waiting to hear on that. But, I mean, it is really, the wind is just whipping through the downtown area here. And, of course, as you know, the river is right over there, just a couple blocks away. There is concern about that storm surge coming. We're right above Water Street. And as we anticipate, it will be literally Water Street by tomorrow morning. It will be covered. But as I said, these winds are really picking up. I have not seen anything like this, certainly here today or in any of the last two hurricanes in Florida that I covered. I mean, we got some strong winds, as you well know, because you rode out the storm with me, Miles. We got some strong winds with Francis, but this is like nothing I've seen, and we are anticipating, even over the course of the next 2 hours during this special edition of Newsnight, we're going to be seeing a lot worse, and we'll be here covering it.
Well, clearly these next 2 hours are critical. I'm curious where you are, Anderson, if there is a 16-foot storm surge, as has been predicted for Mobile Bay. Are you going to be underwater where you're standing right now?
Yeah, I certainly hope not. That's not my objective. Well, I'll tell you where we are. We're in a hotel right basically on the riverfront, but we're on the 4th floor of the hotel. There's a sort of a, whoa, hello. There's like a deck area, but we're 4 stories above the ground floor. Now, the ground floor is 12 feet above sea level, so if Max Mayfield is right, 10 to 15-foot storm surge, the ground floor of this hotel is likely to be flooded. We should be fine on the 4th floor. We're already seeing, though, I mean, there is some concern that some of the windows on this floor will blow out. We sort of set up an office, but we're ready to move inside the building and more to the interior of the building if, in fact, those windows do blow out. But we're not anticipating actually being flooded out. The problem, though, is our truck, our satellite truck, is down on the ground. It's about 12 feet off sea level. So if the storm surge is 10 feet, we should be fine. But if it gets up to 15 feet, 20 feet, we may be off the air because our truck literally may go underwater and may have to try to move to higher ground. So we're going to try to stay on the air and upright as much as possible, or as long as possible. And we'll see. We'll see. It's, you know, as you can tell, it's blowing a little bit more now.
Yeah, all right, Anderson, I'm going to let you go. We're going to come back to you in just a little bit. Obviously, Ivan is really bearing its burden, or beginning to do just that in Mobile, and we'll be staying in close contact with Anderson. As we all probably know by now, hurricanes churn around in a counterclockwise rotation, and as a result, it subjects the swath of land to the right of the eye to the worst beating. CNN's Gary Tuchman is in Gulf Shores, Alabama, 50 miles to the right of Mobile Bay and the path of the eye. He joins us now via video phone. What's the situation there, Gary? You're also a little bit to the south, so you might be feeling the effects even more there right now.
Well, that's right. We're to the southeast of Anderson, about 50 miles, as you said, Miles, in Gulf Shores. This is a low-lying beach town, and we can tell you that this town is completely evacuated. We've gone up and down the main street in the beach town. We could not find one civilian who was there. I have never seen such compliance for any hurricane as this one. People were scared and they got out and they were smart because 5 hours ago, the beach town, the main street along the beach started flooding. The water was up to our shins, and that was around 6 o'clock Eastern time. The rain hasn't stopped since they're going to have a severe flooding problem. They haven't had a major hurricane hit in this area for 25 years, since Hurricane Frederick. Exactly a quarter century ago this week, Hurricane Frederick came. They've never had a Category 4 hurricane in the Alabama shoreline, but it's hitting right now. Police were the only ones who were in the town. They actually left the Intracoastal Waterway crossing, the bridge that crosses onto the barrier island, about 2 hours ago, feeling was unsafe. So anyone who would want to go to that barrier island now has the freedom to do so. The police aren't guarding it anymore, but no one has gone over to the island because of the dangers involved. In the streets right now, there is wood floating around. There's a fence along the beach. The fence is actually blown over from the beach and is in the streets floating around right now. As of this point, we have not seen the trees and the power lines go down. Interestingly, the winds here at this point, even though we're to the southeast of Anderson, don't seem to be as intense as in the city of Mobile right now. So we haven't seen the trees go down. We've seen the transformers blow up already, and that's something we've seen during the last 2 hurricanes in Florida. You're just standing there and you hear a boom, and you look behind you and you see a power line blow up. But the power is still on in much of this area. When we were in Fort Pierce for Hurricane Francis the other week, the power went out very quickly. So far, the power is out. We don't anticipate it staying on for very long, but as of now, it still is. But we can tell you that people have truly evacuated. Interstate 65, the major north-south road from Mobile to the northern part of Alabama, they put all the lanes in a northerly direction. They told everyone to get on their way. They even advised people, and this was such unusual information, for people to go 3 hours north if they had nowhere to stay, sleep in their cars to get away from this. Miles?
Gary, let's talk a little bit. Is it high tide there now? Is that a concern that would exacerbate the storm surge as Ivan comes ashore?
They're very concerned about that. High tide isn't for a few hours from now, so they're anticipating rough timing of when the eye crosses and high tide to coincide. So they're certainly concerned about that. But I will tell you, that flooding started even before the rain started coming down heavily. They're going to have a major problem. There's no question about it. It's not a big surprise, and that's why people got out of there. There are houses, dozens of houses, Miles, in this town on stilts right on the beach. Not across the street from the beach, not 2 blocks from the beach, on the beach on stilts. We're very concerned about those homes.
And Gary, where you are right now, are you on fairly high ground?
I would say fairly, we're on moderately high ground. We're not as low as we were when we were on the barrier island, but we are in a safe place. We are standing by a hotel solidly built. We have protection. We know how to take care of ourselves in order to give our viewers the information about what's happening outside.
All right, Gary Tuchman, who is in Gulf Shores, Alabama, watching the storm from there. That's a little taste of what it feels like on the ground with Ivan approaching. Let's gain a little altitude now. Check in with Orland Sidney in the Weather Center, where they're using a full array of technology to track the storm for us. Orland, give us the latest.
Okay, here's what we're looking at right now. This is the very latest information. We're still looking at the storm about 80 miles south of the Alabama coast. It's about 116 miles south of Mobile. The winds are still holding at 135 miles an hour. At 130, that's the break point between Category 3 and Category 4. And we're looking at our pressure at about 931 millibars, moving to the north at 12 miles an hour. Now, here's a couple of things I want to point out. We do have a little pool of warm water just off the coast here, and it looks like that's what's been helping the storm over the past few hours. However, there is a little bit of cool water just off the coast, and I don't think that's going to weaken the storm at all, but I think it'll probably keep it from strengthening very much more. I don't think we're going to see a Category 5 landfall, certainly, but it's still going to be a dangerous, huge storm, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this tick up a little bit as far as the wind speeds are concerned. Let's take a look at the next graphic that I have for you. My producer, Mike Grogan, helping me out tonight. This is what it looks like on the radar picture. You can see the eye very well to the south of Mobile. Mobile. Here is Mobile Bay. Extending back now, we go to the west, and there is New Orleans. And, of course, off to the east, here is Panama City. You can see that the entire Gulf Coast getting affected by this storm as these thunderstorms roll in. We also had quite a bit of tornadic activity a little bit earlier today that I'll point out to you a little bit later. I think we may also have some buoy data now to show you what's going on as far as the wave action. We did get some waves around 50 feet a little bit earlier just to the north of the eye, and then as you went to the northwest we had waves about 21 feet. It looks like those waves, of course, will be continuing to work their way into the coast as we go on through the afternoon. So those dangerous battering waves on top of the storm surge are a real problem. This now shows us the accumulated rainfall, and some of these dark oranges and reds here are as much as 8 inches, but you can see up around Mobile so far 3 inches, 5 inches as you head down to the barrier islands, and then you get a little bit heavier, of course, as you go on down southward towards the center of the storm. In addition to that, we have had numerous tornado warnings. There is a tornado watch that's in effect until 2 a.m. This is way down from what we saw earlier. We had as much as 11 counties under tornado warnings. Now there are 3. We did, Miles, have 2 confirmed fatalities near Panama City. Hopefully not seeing any more of those tonight. Miles?
Orland, generally, is there any pattern in those tornadoes when you see a hurricane? Do they generate out of a certain part of a hurricane, or are they just random?
Yeah, they sure do. Generally, you'll see those in the right front quadrant of the storm. And I don't know, Mike, if you can get me back to the radar quickly, I can show you what that looks like. The center of the storm, of course, is down to the south. If you take it, cut it in half here, and then cut it in half again, you get the right front quadrant of the storm. That's where your greatest storm surge will be. That's where your strongest winds will generally be. And that's where you're also going to find most of your tornadoes. And you can see we've got these little indicators here showing where we show rotation in thunderstorms. Notice it's in the right front quadrant. As this storm system then works its way on in, every location in this right front quadrant has the potential for tornadoes. This watch box is in effect until 2 a.m. Central Time. You will see another one. As soon as this expires, they're probably going to issue one a little bit further to the north and northeast. But places like Valdosta, Georgia, Macon, Atlanta, perhaps Birmingham and Huntsville, depending on the track, will probably see a chance for tornadoes tonight and tomorrow morning. Miles?
Orland, a word on the waves we've heard reported. Max Mayfield was talking about buoys out in the Gulf registering 50-foot waves.
Right.
And I start thinking about 50-foot waves coming in on a place like Mobile, and that's not a good thing.
That's bad news.
Do those waves dissipate at all as they come closer to shore? Or do they?
No, they don't. In fact, the waves get taller because the way a wave works is when you get into the shoreline, when the depth of the water is about half the amount of the wave height, that's when the wave breaks. And of course, you're going to get into shallower and shallower water as you go towards the coast. So what's going to actually do is make the waves stand up even more than that. And so you've got your what we call the wave setup. The sea level has been going up the past couple of days in these areas, and then you get the battering waves on top of that, as well as that bulge of water that's going to come in here with the eye of the storm. This is going to be probably a near record storm surge, I think, in some areas. I think Camille's storm surge 1969 was something about 25, 22 feet. This one's probably not going to be as much, but it's definitely going to be one of the higher ones that you've seen along the Gulf Coast.
All right, Camille, there's a storm they still talk about in that part of the world. Orland, Sydney, thank you very much. Obviously, stay close. We'll be back with you quite a bit throughout the next few hours and actually throughout the night. With Ivan bearing down on some 300 miles of Gulf coastline, major evacuations began in earnest yesterday. Nearly 2 million people in 4 states have been told in no uncertain terms to get out of the way. Here's CNN's Susan Candiotti.
Winds increasing on bridges leading to Biloxi and Gulfport beaches. Streets deserted, except for a few trying to make it home past a dusk to dawn curfew.
Okay. All right, bud.
Across the street from a floating casino, its owner spending the night with a few employees at his now evacuated hotel. Are you worried about the safety of your employees and you who are sticking around?
Yeah, we've got very few people here, actually. And everybody is sticking together. We're all in areas of the hotel that are what I would consider very safe.
Earlier, we found others who decided against evacuating. Mary Catherine Adams is riding out Ivan with her husband and 90-year-old mother. in this stately two-story home on the National Historic Registry. There's the Gulf, and that's Highway 90 that runs along it. And this is how close the water is to the Adams family home. Yet they insist they will be safe from the storm surge. Let's hope so. The family plans to hunker down on the second floor. You feel just a little bit nervous as the storm approaches now?
I'm a little too tired to be nervous. I may get nervous as soon as the wind starts picking up, and when darkness comes, it's usually frightful because you hear sounds.
Lieutenant Greg Federico not thrilled with her decision to stay, but no one's being forced out. Farther down on the bayou, he checks on Henderson Point, where the water's already rising. There's a family that won't change its mind about staying put.
Unfortunately, if the water comes up, we will not be able to get back in to get you all out. So y'all are aware of all that. Wish y'all a lot of luck and be safe.
But as he leaves, Lieutenant Federico calls it an officer's nightmare.
It's a tough decision that they've made. I just hope that they ride it out safely.
Now, these people that you've seen want to make it clear they're not trying to thumb their nose at authority by defying an evacuation order. They honestly think that they'll be all right. They say we've got supplies, we've got food, we've got candles, we've got batteries. And because they have been, some of them, through hurricanes before, they think that they'll be able to get through this one, too. For example, the last man that you saw in the story, that particular house made it through Hurricane Camille back in 1969. He wasn't living there at the time, but he feels pretty confident about it. And speaking of that, disaster planners here, Miles, are feeling a little less worried because now they seem slightly more confident that they are going to be on the weaker side of the storm here. So far, we have measured tropical storm wind gusts of maybe 36 miles an hour, but quite frankly, we're in a bit of a low-lying area right now and are buffered from the wind by a building on one side, the hotel where we're staying, and the interstate is a bit up on a rise over in that direction. But it certainly will be a long night ahead. They are expecting a storm surge of 10 to 15 feet. And flooding is certain because they also have not only the Gulf Coast, but they've got the Back Bay here to deal with. Miles?
It sure is a study in contrast compared to what Gary is contending with on the right side of the eye, Susan. It seems to me, however, you know, people always go back to these benchmark storms, what they've experienced. In this case, Camille in 1969. Seems like that could be a very dangerous trap.
It could be, of course, and that's why authorities are very clear on you can't mess around with these projections. It's very difficult, as we all know, to say exactly where the storm will make landfall, and it could still jog a little bit one way or the other. That's why it's so important for people to pay attention to disaster planners and what they are suggesting, the advice that they give. But they know here, for example, they had Hurricane George most recently in 1998. We were here covering that storm, and they had flooding then. They're going to get flooding now. It's a matter of how high the winds are going to be in addition to that. Obviously, for everyone involved, up and down this coast, the Panhandle, it's going to be a long night.
Clearly. CNN's Susan Candiotti in Biloxi, who will be with us all throughout this long night, watching the storm from there. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll check back in with Anderson Cooper, who is in the spot where the bullseye is, Mobile, Alabama. He's able to stand up okay for now. It's not so easy right now as hurricane-force winds bear down there. Also, we'll hear from the bunker in Alabama. 4 states have declared emergencies, but of course Alabama may face the worst devastation. We'll talk with the head of emergency services for that state after a break. Newsnight from Atlanta continues in a moment.
Newsnight is brought to you by Pacific Life, offering insurance, annuities, and investments. Pacific Life, the power to help you succeed.